All right, hello and welcome to another installment of the Poet's Voice reading series sponsored by Black Moss Press. I'm your host, Alicia LeBay, and today I have with me two poets from Windsor, Ontario. Samantha Bedoa is a new poet on the scene, a young writer living in Windsor, and although she's not published much in journals, she enjoys an underground reputation as a rising star in the performance poetry scene. She was recently named Youth Poet Laureate for Windsor, and her first book, So Am I, is one that addresses faith, appearances, self-love, romantic love, and the experiences of being a daughter of an immigrant family. Into her poetry, she weaves life as a Maronite Christian, the struggle to untangle the complexities of a ritual and belief in God. Her poems are lyrical stories that deal directly with identity, mental health, and faith. Samantha is a new voice on the block. Welcome, Samantha.
Thank you.
And we also have Daniel Lockhart joining us. Daniel is the author of 7 books, including Devil in the Woods, published in 2019 by Brick Books, and Breaking Right, published by Porcupine's Quill in 2020. His work has appeared in Best Canadian Poetry in English 2019, Tri-Quarterly, Arc Poetry Magazine, Grain, Belt, and the Malahat Review, among many. He is a Turtle Clan member and a registered member of the Moravian of the Thames First Nation, and currently resides at the South Shore of Waiwi-Yatsanong, Windsor, Detroit, Michigan. His work has been generously supported by the Ontario Arts Council and the Canada Council for the Arts. He is the publisher at Urban Farmhouse Press and poetry editor for the Windsor Review. Welcome, Daniel.
Koulomosi, Ani, bonjour. Ça va?
Thank you both for joining me today. So we're going to start with Samantha. I would like to ask you, what was it like growing up with rules and roles that were meant to restrict who you are based on your gender?
That is a big question, but I'll try to answer it in a time frame less than 2 hours. It was tough. Growing up in a Catholic church and having parents who are very traditional and who came straight from Lebanon, traditional gender roles were very much reinforced, not only at home, but at the church. And that's hard when you're a woman and you are automatically kind of assume that you want to take a position of less responsibility and less power within the church. You grow up and the church is supposed to be the holiest spot for you, yet you don't see women in any places of power. If the altar is the holiest of the holy and I cannot step in there as a woman in any meaningful way, it kind of screws with your head a little bit, to say the least. And yeah, when your whole belief system and whole meaning system is based around places of subjugation, you start to bring that into your personal life as well. So a lot of times I would take a back role to my brothers just because I thought a man was supposed to have more power over me and have more voice. So for me, it was really hard to kind of deconstruct why I believe these gender roles and how it's affected my life in many ways. Not only, just growing up and going through the motions of puberty and high school and just the normal things, but even today as a writer, as a woman, how I interact with spaces that include men in them, and how I kind of run my life. So it's a little bit tricky on the gender side, but even when you take into account Catholicism and how it relates to your body, because Catholics, and I never understood this, they have this weird dichotomy with the body. It's very unholy, and you're not supposed to look at yourself or touch yourself, but yet all of the roles are based on me being a woman and what my power or what my responsibility is being in a woman's body. So for me, it was weird. I was always kind of like, do I care about my body? Do I not care about my body? Why does it hold so much power over me if we're supposed to be spiritual beings? So yeah, kind of deconstructing these gender roles and the role of my body in my own life has been a struggle and a journey, but something I think that you have to do when your belief system, not only around your place in relation to men, but your place as an individual is so set in stone for you. So kind of hard to navigate those roads and find out, what still holds meaning in your life and what doesn't. Because I do believe that some of the symbols in the Catholic Church are beautiful and wonderful, but a lot of them are not. So you have to kind of navigate that within yourself, what still holds meaning, what still doesn't, and what you allow to still have control over your life. So.
No, that's great. I can really relate to a lot of that growing up French Catholic myself. So I'm going to actually ask both of you a question now, because I feel you're mentioning faith and religion a lot, and I feel like Daniel might be able to chime in on this a little bit too, himself being Native and the colonizers definitely using religion to try and what is the word I'm looking for? To try and eradicate Indigenous tribes. So the question I'd like to ask both of you, and Samantha, maybe you can start, is how does your poetry help you to reclaim your lost self?
Oh, it has helped a ton. I think when I was younger, I didn't question things as much as I did now. But when you get older, you start to see the nuances in your everyday life. Like, for example, my mom grew up in Lebanon. She left when she was 23, but her first language is technically French. It's not even Arabic. And when you get into a lot of the Arabic culture, especially Lebanon, you realize that a lot of it is influenced by colonizers, specifically France. So when you start to unpack all of these things, you realize how much of your ancestry was lost, and how much you took for granted, and how much you didn't even realize was given to you by colonizers who want to change you and subjugate you and eradicate your culture. So for me, kind of using poetry as a tool to rediscover myself and unpack these things that I really did take for granted, and especially being Catholic, and especially being in Arabic, and especially living in Windsor, where you can't throw a stone without hitting a street that's in French. So kind of unpacking all of these things around me that just keep reminding me of what was lost and how to connect in that way, especially when I am so far away from my family. They are in Lebanon, and there's a lot going on right there, to say the least. So even when you can't connect with them, face to face, it's important to unpack the history and just to realize what is yours and what is given to you and what you really can take back.
Religion, finding our way, right? These are good questions. For the Lenape, for the Delaware, we're here because Christians sort of shepherded us north. It is a saving thing for us in a lot of ways. But you know what I gotta say? Goddamn those Catholics. I actually I went to Catholic Central. I enjoyed the education I got there. But I was sort of raised Catholic because my father was a teacher in the Catholic school board. I lived across the street from a Catholic elementary school. It's still always been alien. Catholics to me are a little weird. They like blood and guts, and they don't want you to masturbate. I don't get it, straight up. So I would say that there is definitely an underpinning. Obviously, I have a master's of fine arts in English, and I have an undergraduate in English. I'm colonized, baby. I mean, I'm as colonized as they're going to come in that sense. And that's part of what this poetry is trying to do, is decolonize myself to a certain extent. That involves relearning our languages. So when we think about faith and we think about the way in which religion changed us, yeah, it brought my people north to Bucktown from the Ohio Valley, Indiana area. And that saved us, but it's also created a lot of long-term problems. My father was a first generation, grew up urban Indian, and lost most of his culture because of that sort of separation that comes from that. Now I have a more complicated relationship on my mother's side with her father being Badaoa, who spoke mushrat French, so the Métis French. So he was definitely, he he had issues with the Catholic Church. He kicked a priest out of their house when my mother was a child. Came in demanding money, but he rolled up in a new Oldsmobile, that kind of garbage that we know that goes on with organized religions. Mega churches, Catholicism's not its own sort of deal with that. So religion's still here for us. We still believe in a sort of other Christ figures, and Christ actually plays a role in things like the Peach Pit game in our history. Christ came to visit us in North America. There's a lot of traditional stories about that. But all that aside, religion's going to take us days, right? So when we look at why I write poetry and what it's trying to do to reconnect myself to my past, oftentimes I am trying to create texts that are being put into the world that have Lenape language in them. And for me, that's Unami dialect. So it's the dialect that is most often spoken now in Oklahoma. But we do have Munsee dialect in Ontario as well. I just try to go more for what my sort of heritage tells me I should. So when it comes to a book like Tukoni, the one that we're sort of talking about today, when I return to the 13 moon calendar, which we use instead of months, and it's really a based poetry that's based and a thought process that's based in the land. So I am not only reintroducing those concepts linguistically, but also in the poetry itself. So the idea is that as I write this, I become it again. And I'm putting it back in the world as a blueprint for others. It's not everyone's path to follow my path, but my path I'm making public because I think that's important. Can I get to it?
All right. Well, Daniel, I noticed, especially in Tukone, but a lot of times your poetry, you place imagery of nature at odds with imagery of commercialism or capitalism. And I'm wondering, what are you trying to say by juxtaposing these two images?
Well, let me start with the first bias. I grew up under the shadows of Windsor Assembly. I wasn't born here, but I grown up there in South Walkerville. So capitalism and sort of its very many tentacles I grew up with. My father was also, before he was a teacher, he was a commodity broker. Always told me to invest in hog bellies. Important, okay? Pork bellies, always do that. But the concept that capitalism was always supposed to drive us has always like made me mad. Like I don't believe in the buy culture. I don't believe that we keep building bigger, more beautiful buildings and sprawling our suburbs. That's doing anything but killing ourselves. And if you live in a area that's like workaday, like Windsor, Detroit, or Wawa, Yongetanong, and I would say it's Windsor, Detroit, because this is a very settler sort of mentality that we need to work until we die, and we use that money to buy bigger houses or boats or truck nuts or whatever you want to buy with it. That's a problem with capitalism. And what it did is it pushed me away from Windsor. I spent a year at the University of Windsor, and it wasn't my deal. I went to Trent, and Trent University is renowned as a Marxist institution for education. And I took Native studies there, but I learned from John Wadlin. I spent a lot of time with Wadlin, and a lot of my John Wadlin's he's a settler, but he's one of the foremost leaders in Canadian studies in the 90s. And he sort of began to unburden myself from the plague that is capitalism. I mean, that's sort of what did most of this shit to us, right? As non-white people, males predominantly. So he was that sort of first guy that said, the only thing that determines you is the land. And it was a way for me to even gauge that sort of difference between me and my elders and me and my cousins as we were trying to figure out what it means to be Delaware or Lenape in the 21st century. And it became this juxtaposition because capitalism is not going away. We need to talk about it. It's here. And it's also the central controlling metaphor for our day-to-day lives. I mean, for God's sakes, they're trying to force people back to work. We can't close businesses down when there's a plague that's killing people. I mean, we're in this absolute, like you can see, it's a fanatical religion. And from an outsider who tries to avoid that sort of capitalist economy as much as possible, you can see it's a fanatical religion. And my work tries to look at that by placing what are our alternatives. And our alternatives they're all around us. And I think when we had the start of COVID, we started to see what happens when capitalism can kind of shut up for a little while. We have wild turkeys and foxes and coyotes running down the streets in Windsor here, which is what this place should be. And that sort of process, by first of all seeing what else is available and challenging the dominant discourse, which is driven by capitalism and booksellers like Indigo or publishers like Random Penguin House. These are people they're going to embody those ideas. And what I would say is I want to push the idea of nature first. This comes from my sort of background, my training, where I spent a lot of time with Gary Snyder's and Philip Wallen's work. A lot of, even Richard Hugo from Montana. I mean, these are writers that embrace the natural world as a connection point. And with this collection, you can look all the way back to Basho and Issa, and Busan. These are the great sort of haiku writers that understood that our answers are all right there. We don't need to go and buy it at Toys R Us or Indigo this week. They're out there and trying to share that experience. That's what goes on.
Thank you. I agree with a lot of what you've said. Now, we still have a little bit of time left, so starting with Samantha, if you'd each like to read a poem that you feel relates to some of the questions I've asked and some of what we spoke about today.
Sure. Yeah. Can I just add on to something Daniel said? Because I have, as a Windsor factory worker, I have lots of thoughts on capitalism. And I just want to say, I totally agree with everything Daniel said, but also how shitty it is that, you know, people are forced to kind of be cogs in the capitalist system if they want healthcare and dental care, and if they want a roof over their head, especially with rent prices in Windsor. So it's just kind of like, it's hard to critique the system in a meaningful way when you're so bogged down and tired and just trying to keep a roof over your head and trying to get cavities filled in. So it's a shit system and we should think about stuff. So thanks, Daniel. Okay, so the poem I'm going to read is called Robes, and it's based on my time as an altar girl at church and kind of the observations I made being in this system as a girl and not as a woman. So this one's called Robes. I see women in almost every breath of my church. I see women leading Sunday school, telling crowds of mostly little girls about things they cannot grasp yet. Things like eternity, sacrifice, things better lived than learned. I see women making sure the church is kept clean, making sure the stained glass is kept glistening, replacing candles that no longer burn, making sure the grounds are kept beautiful, making sure the church is kept standing. I see the choir leader making songs older than her, then all of us feel new, feel important, feel close. I see women painted delicately, framed ornately, hung in places with the best light. I see women in almost every breath of my church, except the altar, except the place where one is closest to body, blood, and spirit. I realize that woman is a title not yet mine, because the priest asks me to be an altar girl. Women are all confined to corners of the church, to roles that are easily hidden or disvalued. I realize that the robe I meant to wear doesn't fit me quite right. It bunches in the front, in places that are just beginning to swell and grow. I realize the altar boys don't have to worry about this. It is as if the garment was made for them. That's that one.
That was great. Thank you. Daniel, yeah, you've got something prepared for us as well.
I do? No, I'm just joking. Thank you, Samantha. That was beautiful. Thank you. Anushik, I should say. Let's decolonize a little bit today. Miigwech, Anushik. There you go. So obviously we got this lovely book out. Tacone, which is a Delaware word, which is what we're going to use for the Detroit River, because it's not really a river. It's a strait. Talk about that later. I do want to make one quick shout out. First of all, this is a cormorant, a gagashibig on the front. Right now, Ontario is going to do something real stupid and let people try to murder all the cormorants. They're a keystone species. We need to preserve them. Speaking of nature. So when you are moving about, they're beautiful shorebirds. They create ecosystems. They're fantastic. I'm going to read a haibun from this. So this book was obviously it's a collection of haiku and haibun, and the haibun are all for Detroit music. And I had actually spent the first parts of the pandemic going through these poems, locked away from Detroit, and really thinking about the world that we lost. Because, guys, I hate to tell you this, it's not coming back. Whatever the normal was before is over. And we didn't lose, like, Bob Seger's still with us, but he's no longer performing. Bob Seger was one of those sort of quintessential Detroit voices that we all knew growing up. And I want to read this first poem, which is Eli Wiskawik. When Tazing crosses Tacony Sipu, sings between high rises. After Bob Seger's Against the Wind. Near mid-morning, sun low enough to make even blue glass skyscrapers turn gray, I walk from Lafayette south on Griswold. Wind tossing discarded flyers, hot dog wrappers, paper smoothie cups into flight across car-choked streets, gusting past second and third-story windows. Here, the city maintains the same flow from Ruther to Bieber to King, and the wind push of ancestors stirs it all. That push and stir comes against us, and the things we plant into the earth, it courses up steam, howls medicine songs between hard edges of monuments to recent collected mythologies. Penobscot, Buell, and Champion, I am wrapped in it, every part nostalgia and every part pride, every bit knowing we were young and we were strong. But despite that fact, and we pray our appearances, we have aged. I feel it. Motions are more labored, more hollow, more in keeping with ritual than in necessity. Across Jefferson, with each step, I wish I didn't know now what I didn't know then. From UAW headquarters to the Tricentennial Wheel, this motion through half-busy urban setbacks is carried partially by wind, partially by habit. Habit that is comforting. Habit arrived through age, wind that is driving, and I confess into the fountain at the center of Hart Plaza that I was living to run and running to live. But here is home. Here is the earth that I feel roots need to be pushed downward. At the plaza, I am older now and still running against the wind. Across the water, the casino light burns red. Mimes, sun beyond bridge.
Thank you. That was great, you two. I think we have time for another 2 poems from each of you if you want, if you have something picked out.
I was thinking something.
Sure.
Go.
Let's start with Samantha.
Okay. So this is the first poem in my collection, So Am I. And it's called Holy Water for Bird Baths. And yeah, it's just about me realizing as a young girl that it's about me realizing stuff as a young girl, we'll say that. So holy water for bird baths. There is a bird bath in the park across the street. There are bottles filled with holy water lining the pantry in my mother's house. I am 7 years old when I take them. Fill a plastic shopping bag, drag it across the pavement, stop only when I get close enough to hear the songbirds. There are 4 of them lounging on the lip of the basin. They don't move when I move, small, delicate steps. I was a ballerina then. Arms stretched high, standing on tippy toes. I can only just reach the bath. I will learn later that just is a word I cannot say without my tongue and skin swelling, but right now, I like the sound the water makes as it falls into the near empty bird bath. I like the sound the water makes as it falls onto itself. Splashes were never something I avoided. The bottles are empty. The bath is filled. The birds are still singing. The birds are falling. The birds are not flying. The birds are drowning. The birds have stopped singing. Too much water. There was too much water. Songbirds aren't good in water. can't swim well become too unbalanced when they fall in to remember they are birds who have wings that turn skies into boulevards and open dirt roads. I used to think that birds were invincible. It is the first time I learned that even something holy can kill you if you forget who you are. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you. That was cool.
Was that like a Catholic thing? Like, did your mothers have holy waters in their pantry? Because everyone I knew did. It's just a weird thing.
We weren't real Catholics. Well, maybe we were. That's not what I mean. That's why we didn't have it. But no, we were. The Catholic Church wouldn't marry my parents, and there's still some bitterness over that. So they got married in the United Church because Catholics like dead Indians more than like living ones. Anyways, that's all a side note. I'm sure that some priest is going to murder me now in my sleep. I hope not.
Well, if you guys ever need bottles of holy water,
I'll smudge you. How's that sound? I got that. So we want one more, right? One more? Okay. There's a lot of talk about church, and I think I got to do something about a church, don't I? And when I think about Detroit, and I think about proper churching, not that fake churching, the real churching, I think of one person. I think of Aretha, the Queen, the greatest gospel singer. Okay, from Detroit. Mahalia Jackson might give her a run for her money sometimes, but I like Aretha. I'll put my money on Aretha. Okay. The last time I did this poem, I did it with a full band, so this is going to be a little quiet for me. I think I like it better quiet. No offense to whistling. So this is when Aretha died. I want to always point this out. It was the most magical moment I think I've ever seen. It's at Comerica Park the day after she died, and there was a double rainbow over the screen, the Jumbotron, when they put her memorial up. So just know the Queen's watching over while we're young and on. She'll take care of us. In the city of prayer, after Aretha Franklin's I Say a Little Prayer. Whisper our direction as rising sun coaxes haze mist from trees above rectangular residential blocks. Founded on the myths of righteous colonial rule and belief that deities fit into one imported religion, we move on. Upon crooked currents of vehicular glide, we course past shuttered auto plants, cinder block payday loan cages, and hand-painted Michigan Lotto party stores. First hours of morning in an impossible city. Windows down and into the day we roll with FM radio gospels. Last night's brown bag empties and vacant fields, parking lots. The moment I wake up, before I put on my makeup, I say a little prayer for you. Eastward to the market, through wide boulevards and crooked, rusted lampposts, St. Josaphat rises before the overpass across the freeway below. We cross below the church, the quiet of shuffle between songs and the rush of air as we make our way. This is my prayer. Answer my prayer. 3 church turrets, clawed sky, Rensen shadow behind it. There's your capitalism. Damn you, Rensen. By the way, heartfelt reach out and prayers, tobacco down for all the Michiganders that we've lost to this horrible, horrible plague that we're going through right now. And I want to damn every politician that's responsible for their deaths.
Thank you both. Thank you. Yeah, I think it's nice to say some words like you just did about for all the people who've lost their lives to COVID, who have lost their lives, like both of you said, to the being cogs in the machine, right? So with that, I think that brings us to all the time we have today. So I want to thank you both for joining me this afternoon and for sharing your wonderful poetry with us. And thanks to everyone at home who's tuning in. And we'll see you for the next installment of The Poet's Voice.
Lepikanawich, y'all. And it was a real pleasure sharing space with y'all again.